Hello and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place where we share creative and inspiring learning in our schools. Season 1, Episode 7. Hello and welcome back to Education on Fire with me, Mark Taylor. Today I'm delighted to welcome Ashley Manuel, and he's the creator of Growing with Gratitude, and this is something which I find really, really important, and something which I come across quite a lot, and just in education currently, because children have to go to school, it's something they have to do. The whole idea of being grateful for the education that you've got and grateful for things around you, I think is a really key thing to try and get across. And this organisation is Ash will tell you as he gets the story going of sort of how from being a teacher in a school in Australia, how this all came about and how it's grown. So welcome, Ash, and many thanks for being on the show.
No, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having me on.
Brilliant. So, can you give us a little bit of background? Tell us a bit about your background from your sort of teaching beginnings and how Growing with Gratitude became a reality and what your vision was for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mark, I'm from Adelaide, Australia, and I guess I've always lived here and grew up here. And I guess out of high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to become, but I guess being from a family of teachers, I decided to go down the path of teaching at university and did the whole primary school teaching, but really wanted to be a PE teacher. So it was a bit of it wasn't really a risk. I knew that maybe it wouldn't start off being a PE teacher. Normally coming out of university and teaching jobs, you just take what you sort of can get, which sort of happened. But then I was very fortunate at the end of my last year of teaching to be at a manual primary school in Adelaide, which is a very, very, very good school. And I was there for 12 years. And I guess along the way, though, I discovered that I didn't really want to teach for the rest of my life. I think I discovered that life's quite short, and I think it's about sometimes living on your terms, doing what you want to do when you want. And as a teacher, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love teaching, but one thing that sort of was a bit of a not concern, but just something that was on my mind, that we get told to when we have to be at school, when the bell goes, when we leave and stuff like that. And then I came around this way of thinking about, maybe there's something more that I can do to maybe stop, teach a bit earlier to do the things that I really want to do when I want, kind of thing. So I looked into property investing actually, and discovered some really interesting things about property investing, and researched a lot of some of the world's top property investors, and what they kept on saying was that their happiness led to their success. And which I found quite interesting. And then the more I looked into it, they were talking about this thing about gratitude leading to happiness, and happiness leading to success. And I always I guess like many of us, we think that those people who become successful, they become happy when they become successful. But there was a pattern that was developing. It just wasn't one person talking about this. It was a number of different people. And I thought, there might be something in this. So I started to look into this thing about cultivating happipiness and as well, and also, I realised that you can actually cultivate happiness and gratitude by doing these little daily activities. And the first time I came about this was a book called The Slight Edge by a guy called Jeff Olson. And I think it should be, in my opinion, it should be compulsory reading for every teenager around the globe. I think because it sets out, if you just do daily little activities every day over time, can lead to success. It doesn't have to be done overnight, but if you just got that daily discipline to work on actions daily, then you can get to where you want. And that sort of really resonated with me. And then in his book, he recommended a book called The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor, who's a positive psychologist at Harvard University in America. And I really resonated with his book as well. And he's had some great, just little short 2 to 10, 15, 20 minute daily activities. And I started to do them in my life, and had a real positive impact, just writing things like 3 things you're grateful for, doing an act of kindness a day, whether it was just a couple of minutes. In his book, he talks about, even if it's just 2 minutes, writing an email to say thanking them for something. and also a lot of positive reflection. So taking the best parts from the day and thinking about the good parts and not worrying about so much about the negative things that happen. And I started to do these kinds of things, and also a little bit of meditation, which I've never done before, but I discovered that's a very powerful practice. And I did this for like probably a year, very consistently, stuck to it very, very strictly, and it had a massive, massive positive impact. And one day I was just walking along and like doing my exercise as I started to get into a good habit of doing something every day. And I just had this idea of, well, I've learned this stuff in my early 30s at the time. I'm thinking, I could have been learning this when I was in primary school. So in January 2014, basically, as of this recording, exactly pretty much 3 years ago, I thought, well, okay, if I use the theory of the slight edge and just take positive daily actions over time, I'm going to see if I can create something for primary schools. Because when I learned about this stuff in my own life, I looked around for things that I could teach the children at school, but I couldn't really find anything that was on the same wavelength and the same thinking that was about just little positive daily habits around gratitude and kindness and things like that. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go at creating it. So as I said, I just thought, okay, I'm going to commit to work on this every day for a year, starting January 2014, and just see where it goes. So I did that and had a lot of good momentum in the first 12 months, built some really good relationships. And one of the criteria I wanted to create this program was it had to be evidence based. So one of the first things I did was I contacted Professor Deb Price from the University of South Australia, who's the Professor of Wellbeing Education at the university, and caught up with a coffee with her and just explained the idea that I had and a bit of the reasoning behind it. And she said, "This sounds great. Let's apply for a grant and let's see if we can test it." So we did, and we were awarded the grant, and we did a whole school approach with about 600 children 560 kids in Adelaide in South Australia, where I'm from, and also one classroom in Hong Kong, just for a bit of diversity. So that's how it started, and now 3 years later we've sort of grown, listened to teachers' feedback and parents' feedback, and also just children. Like a lot of that process was interviewing children as well, so that they were able to give some feedback about what impacted them the most. And yeah, as I'm sure that we can talk about a bit more about what's in the program, Mark, but that's basically how it came about, growing with gratitude. And yeah, it's something that I'm really enjoying doing currently, and yeah, can't see it stopping anytime soon.
It's a really interesting and a really great story. I'm just on a personal note. You said you sort of committed to a year. Did you feel like you needed an amount of time for it to sort of almost seep into who you were and become part of who you were, or did you, as you started it, did you sort of find you actually ended up having sort of almost like bits of oh hooray, a sort of a ha-ha moment and just know what was going on, or was it literally sort of bit by bit it started to sort of become part of who you were and you saw the benefits from it?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it was a part of who I was before I started, because I probably was on this journey for actually just a year, probably a bit longer than that actually. It was probably a couple of years I started to do these habits, and it not only it impacted like just doing daily habits of like gratitude and things like this, because before I knew what gratitude was, like it's been but grateful for things that we have, but until you actually practice it, or in my opinion, it doesn't mean much. You actually got to practice it to get that full benefit. And I think after a couple of years doing that, it was a part of me. And then as I went along with trying to set up a program for primary schools, so teachers can use some resources to teach children positive habits in a fun, engaging way. I think that's when I took that approach of just doing it daily, because I don't have in business sense, I don't have a business background or anything like that. So it's just a matter of working out as you go. At the start, I thought I can do this all on my own, but after a couple of months, I realised, no, that's not going to happen. I need help. So I needed mentors. I needed to build partnerships. So I think that was the journey. I sort of it was a part of me first, but then I have been able to grow from, developing something from what was a part of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I know from having now created this podcast that it's you sort of suddenly have this sort of burning ambition and a desire to spread what you're learning and what you're really interested in, and like you say, you realise that you can't do it on your own, whether it's a technical thing or a business thing. You need help and support from one way or another, and also you need to be part of a community, especially the community that you're trying to sort of become part of, as you were. So like I say, those relationships with schools and the university are just absolutely crucial in that, because I think it just gives you the support, and it gives you the foundation that you need sometimes, just to think, actually, I knew I felt this was right, but just having other people say, yes, actually, I know that this is a good idea and there's a lot of benefit in here is, I think is a really positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more, Mark.
So from from a school's point of view, I mean, as we've just been saying, you're from South Australia. The program itself, you're able to access that from anywhere in the world. So I mean, I'm based here in the UK, and a lot of my audience are UK based, and also from the US, as well as some other countries around the world. So just explain a little bit about how the program works, and specifically why you think it works for school children. I mean, you said you sort of got to it a bit later, and but I can understand that kind of just having it embedded in schools just means that it just becomes is natural to them as learning to read and write, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just I guess going back to that first part of the question, Mark, with the it's like the aim is to create a global, I guess, a global community, and we've got schools. I mean, there's different levels of that schools are involved in, and there's on the website. I'm sure that will be linked up somewhere. It's growingwithgratitude.com, but there's free resources a free resource library where teachers and schools can access some resources to get started. And we've got schools from 44 schools, families, and teachers from 44 countries that access that. So it's developing to a nice global community. And then if schools want to take it to a whole level where it's a whole school approach, it's in the last 6 or so months, it's actually been able to gone from printable materials to actually putting it online it's online, and it's easy for teachers and schools to access, and it's just it makes just a lot more easier for teachers to implement. And that's one of the things that I wanted to do as well, because I know that teachers have. Well, I've been a teacher myself, and I think that's one of the I guess the advantages that I had in this doing this is that I knew that teachers always get stuff added to their daily schedules or their curriculums and not much taken away. And so it had to be easy for teachers to access, to implement. And I wanted to create something. It's like a done for you type model where all the resources are done for the teacher, and they just have to access the resources. I guess just read up on the little activities or the lessons that are involved, just to, I guess, level their knowledge so they know what they're teaching, but all the resources are there for them. And that's that's what I guess one of the main points was, to make it easy for teachers. But some of the results that we had has been like really brilliant, and I mean, one thing that really stands out to me is I was speaking to one of the principals of the schools that does the program, and he was telling me that a parent came up to him and said, "What have you done to my child?" And the principal sort of looked a bit stunned. He said, "He's actually doing stuff around the home for my family, or for our family, and doing things." And he's actually saying that he's grateful and thanking us for things and like that. And that stemmed from what they were doing in the classroom with the program. So it's a two-way thing. So and the reason why that was because part of the program is it's based on something called the 5 Habits of Happiness, and one of the 5 habits is it's called Operation Home Service, which is kids doing things around the house for their families to serve. So that's a bit of a part of service, and he started to do things around the house and started to use those things about gratitude in the home. So what was actually happening from school, he was taking it and using that at home, and that kid was in year 3. So it can have an impact at quite a young age, and it's just about training kids' minds to focus on those things that we can be grateful for. And it's not going to happen overnight, but the idea is that just do daily, short, 2 to 10 minute little activities and cultivate those habits. And it's just about, that's what the program is based on. And that's why it's easy for teachers to teach, because it's not time consuming. It's just little consistent daily action. Now, it doesn't have to be every day, but if you can do a little activity, which is maybe based on gratitude, kindness, serving others, positive reflection, and something we called another one of the 5 habits is a wellbeing warrior, which is exercise and a bit of meditation side of things. And if we can just teach children to do those little daily habits each day, then it's going to set them up for a life of, I guess, happiness, joy, and resilience. I think they're the building blocks to create those things. When we talk about gratitude and empathy and things like that, that builds resilience and that happiness and joy in our lives. And when we're happy, like we work really well, we can concentrate better, we have better relationships, our academic achievement is a lot better, and that's something that we've found has worked in the program as well. And that's actually going back to that university study, that the hypothesis, I guess, question, if you like, was does gratitude and other positive habits increase achievement? And it's not just academic achievement, but it's like achievement with relationships and in life in general. So it's actually one thing I didn't realise, Mark, when we started this university study, is how long it actually takes, the process of study. So we completed the study probably just over 12 months ago now, and the first paper hasn't actually been released. So I didn't realise it's actually got to be a long process. But I was involved in a lot of the testing, and I guess this is from me interviewing kids, parents, and teachers as well. So we know we've got some really good feedback through that. But there'll be, hopefully in the next month, I've been told that the first paper will be released. So I'm sure that we'll be able to get that out to schools as well when we receive that ourselves.
Yeah, and I guess that's really good, isn't it, to sort of have that cooperation and just that sense of sort of people reinforcing, I guess, what they already know, because I would imagine those papers are really going to just be able to show you what everyone's feeling. And as you were chatting, it really sounded to me like a lot of it's about awareness, isn't it? And I think the whole age and how you get involved in this is an important factor, because I think children, when they're very young, they're really keen to please and to serve and to these things are sort of natural things which they do, and as they get older, I just think the environment that they're in, and often the school environment, is very I don't know, I guess you get a little bit away from that unless you actually become sort of focused and aware of it, which seems to be what you're doing. The program is such that it gives you the skills that you need to do to bring you back to that. And I guess if you started early enough, you're just encouraging them to do what they were doing naturally. And as they're a little bit older, I guess they're then in a position just to sort of think, oh yes, that is part of me, and I'm aware of now what's going on. And like you said about the story about taking it back into the home, just that kind of, they then are aware of what everyone does at home, and actually being part of that, and actually feeling what that's like, and then actually feeling the positive benefits of that. And that's quite a long way of doing a chore because you've been told to do it, and it's actually very different when you do it from a place of growth and happiness and wanting to serve, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one thing I think, Mark, I read somewhere that I think children develop, or people develop their habits when they're or the majority of their habits when they're like 3 or 4 or 5 years of age. And that's very interesting. And I think if kids can start these positive habits when they start school, as you say, like kids, when they're young, especially when they're when they're age 4 or 5, they are keen to help. But it does seem to, I've noticed that as well, like in school, as they get older, I think there's a bit of a middle period, because when they get to that, I guess, grade 6, when they're in that leadership position at the primary school, they do take on more responsibility. But there are a couple of year levels in that, maybe year 3, 4, 5, where that responsibility, it does sort of, I guess, go away a bit, where they go through this stage of thinking they're a bit more entitled and don't tend to want to give too much. But I think it does pull, when they have that leadership role and the responsibility, and they're the older kids in the school, yes, they take on that responsibility. But then if they go to that high school, well, then it drops back again, and they probably go back into their shell a bit, and maybe think that serving isn't. Yeah, it might stop a little bit. But if we can really embed that culture in the school and the children themselves from the start, then hopefully they'll always continue on. There will be no sort of, I guess, up and downs in that way of thinking. And also, this is not just for primary school kids. This is for the teachers as well. So, I mean, I stumbled across this way of thinking through positive educate or positive psychology by looking to property investing. So I'm sure that a lot of teachers aren't aware how positive education and this way of being grateful and how you can actually reframe things to, I guess, create more happiness in your day. And it's fine to be sad and angry and frustrated with things. That's just the way human nature is. But we don't really want to be frustrated and angry and sad all the time. But if we can just use little, if we've just developed these little habits like around gratitude and kindness, just to, if things do go wrong, then we can pull ourselves back to more of a neutral state just by thinking, okay, well, yeah, this is going to be a tough conversation I'm going to have with this parent. It's not going to be easy, but at the end of the day, I am grateful that I've got a home to go to tonight. I've got a family, and it's just, I'm sure I'll be fine. It's not going to be really that bad. And it's just like reframing things like that. And that's just a little example. But if we can train kids from an early age to be grateful, obviously it's going to take a bit of time to train them to think like that. But if we can plant the seed as soon as they start school to do those acts of kindness and start these habits of gratitude and serving others and just developing those skills from an early age, it's going to set them up for as I said before, like a positive, hopefully successful life, and same for teachers as well. It's trying to give them some coping strategies if it's that, or if they cope well, to try to get them up to go to another level in their own life. So it's across the whole school, not just for kids.
And that sounds really good. And the other thing I really liked from what you were saying before was the way that you can access it in slightly different levels. So if there's a teacher that thinks is listening and thinks that's a really good idea, they can go to that website and they can download some stuff. They can see what it's about, and they can sort of introduce it into their class in a really easy way. And I think the power is in showing it those things. And I think from that point, if they get some positive effects, and the children within the class will start talking about it to some of their peers in different classes, and then there's a really natural approach then. And I'm sure that teacher can then go to their head or go to the sort of the school governing body in a way of just saying, look, we've had some really positive results here. Let's think about making this a whole school thing to pursue, and sign up and get involved properly, and then get access to all those other things that can really be embedded, so that everyone can really benefit. It just sounds like a really sort of good progression, and I think that really sounds like it can work really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, those resources that you're talking about, Mark, are at growwithgratitude.com. And if you just search if you look along the top of the navigation bar, there's a library there, and teachers, it's got three categories. It's got teachers, schools, and parents or families. And teachers can access, if they click on the teacher button, teachers can access some resources through the library, some free resources that they can use in their classroom straight away. And if they like that, if they like what they see, and they share it with other teachers, that's great. And then it can become a whole school approach. And if they want to take on the whole school approach, then they can come and email me, and we can talk and tell them how they can be a part of the whole school approach, and I guess continue to develop that global community as well, and be part of that global community.
And have you got any examples of you sort of said about how it sort of implements how it sort of infiltrates into the home life and that kind of thing? I guess it also gets involved in the whole community as well, because once you start thinking that way and you're looking to serve others, that I guess the whole thing just sort of becomes part of the school life and the home life, but then I guess it must sort of transform into the community as well. And I guess that's a really positive thing from a school's point of view, as well as obviously from the children's point of view, in how the whole environment improves around you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the goals of what we're trying to do, create this community around between the school and the family home, and bring it together. And I guess one of the things that, and the reason why that was because I guess when I was growing up, I mean, I came from a great family, but it just wasn't, positive education wasn't really around. And I think if we can give, and as I said before, like a lot of teachers didn't know about this, might not know about this way of thinking, but parents are exactly the same. Like a lot of primary school age parents are my age, and they might not understand this way of thinking as well. So if we can show them, not only for their kids to help cultivate their kids in this way as well, but themselves as well, because this is growing with gratitude is based on philosophy of a lot of the top positive psychologists, like you got Sean Akel that it's based on, and Barbara Fredrickson, who wrote a book called Positivity. Sonia, I'm gonna butcher her last name, Sonia Lyubomirsky, I think her last. I'm not sure how you say it, but she wrote a book called The How To of Happiness, and also Martin Seligman, who's I guess considered one of the fathers or the starters of positive or psychology, and then we've taken, I guess, the main, I guess, the most well-known positive psychologists, and adapted based on a lot of their work down to a kid's level. But it's and then also taken the slight edge approach and the compound effect by Darren Hardy, taken all those, I guess, way of thinking and mold it into a kid's level. But the whole philosophy is actually based around stuff for adults, but it's just been modeled and, I guess, packaged into a kid appropriate, a child friendly and a way. But the whole, as I said, the whole philosophy is based around stuff for adults, so it's just as relevant for adults to learn. So if we can build that community around the whole school and also at home and the parents, and one thing that I got drilled into me at Emmanuel Primary School, where I was teaching for 12 years, is our principal, he always was saying that service starts in the home. So he was encouraging children to serve in the home first, and then serve in the school, and then out in the wider community. So that was one of the reasons why one of the 5 habits of happiness is Operation Home Service, is because of his teachings that he really ingrained in our school culture, and that really resonated with me. About, I think it's so important to serve. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing, if you're a business owner, or if you're it doesn't matter. Like, if you're a child, if we can serve each other and learn to serve, that's what I think we're here to help each other. And on earth, that's what our main reason to be, is to serve others. So if we can teach children to do that and have that happening as a whole community, I think it's only going to, I guess, make the world a better place.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think the starting point is exactly what you said. It's even just having the conversation. It's just that kind of just opening the whole door to even thinking in that way. And once you start to step through there, I think it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you're doing this not just because you're told to, but because it's a conversation that you're having, and it's part and parcel of maybe what you're doing in your school. But as soon as you feel the positive effects of actually being involved in that, then you want to do more anyway, because it just feels good, and as you said, I think it's part and parcel of human nature in a really positive way, and actually what we're here for. So once you sort of reconnect with that, it just, the snowball effect is just a really positive one, and as you said, I think it affects the children, affects the parents and the teachers in the school and the wider community, and it's just a really, really good idea, and I'm really pleased that it's working so well for the people that are working with you already, and I'm so pleased to be able to share it to all of our listeners and hopefully extend it further around the world, and I wish you really well with it, and it's interesting that we're talking about it today, because here in the UK, our Prime Minister Theresa May was just talking today about mental health and supporting children in schools and all that sort of thing. And it just seems like rather than having to think about it in terms of people who are already having troubles and needing support, this is the sort of thing which I think is really important, because it just starts by thinking in a different way to begin with, and hopefully that'll help children actually maybe not develop in some of the things that they may have to deal with later, because their whole philosophy of life and their whole understanding of what it is to be growing up actually will be different, and hopefully that's a strong place to be, and a more encouraging place to grow up, and I hope these types of things just help everybody from a really early starting point.
Yeah, absolutely, Mo. I couldn't agree with more what you just said. This is one of the main points to create something like this, is to, I guess, prevent and reduce those mental health issues, because around the Western world at the moment, like anxiety and depression is quite high, and it's not just in adults, it's in children as well. Like, I think there's statistics out I'm not. I guess America, UK, and Australia are probably similar stats. I'd say like one in. Well, I don't want to get it too wrong, but it might be 1 in 4 boys or 1 in 3 girls, or the other way around maybe, that experience some kind of mental health issue by the time they're a teenager, which is quite alarming. And I read somewhere, I can't quite remember their names, but I read this study where they're predicting by 2030 that depression will be the leading disease in the world. So that's a very alarming statistic. And if we can, and those in 2030 is the primary school kids of today. So when they become adults, so if we can, I guess, prevent and create, I mean, it's not going to eradicate it by any means, but if we can play a little part in reducing and changing somebody's life and planting the seed for a life of happiness, and as you said, Mark, just a different way of thinking from a young age to hopefully prevent that from happening, then we've done our job, because it's helped one person, and that's all we aim to do. So if we can do that, job done.
Absolutely, and for all you listeners out there, the great thing is that if you go to growingwithgratitude.com, that's all you really need to do, because from there you'll get the whole feel of what it's all about, as well as obviously having heard Ash speaking today, and you can just download a couple of the resources, just get a real feel for it, in bring it into your classroom, get the conversation going, and then just allow it really just to flow in a natural way, and I'm sure schools will, as soon as they start to really feel the benefit of it, will want to jump on board and get more of those resources and get in part of the program, because it's only a win-win for absolutely everybody, and it's, as we said, it's opening the door, starting the conversation, and that really is the most important thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to start, and it's just on the resource library for teachers. There's there's some templates, there's some lesson ideas, and just little instructions about how to use the template. So it's a really good way to get started. Then, as I said before, if schools want to take on the whole school approach, which can really change the culture as well of the whole school, which we've seen it done, which is actually really, really good. And it's and if you've got a good culture already, you can even take it to another level. So it's a really good. We've had some really good feedback, and we're, I guess, proud of what we've been able to achieve. But it's only going to keep going and keep getting better, because we listen to teachers, we listen to schools, we listen to children themselves, we listen to parents, and to try to improve it and make it better. And I guess that's the beauty of having the internet. You can do that in a short amount of time, rather than having printed materials and books where as soon as you print it, well, it's hard to change. So it's always so it's and also I'll just mention this, Mark. Also, we've done we're running a webinar at the moment, so I'm sure that if you want to link to the webinar as well, like we run, so it's just it goes for about 40 minutes. It just gives teachers an idea about what they can, or just some things that we've learned, and some changes that they can make in their classroom to really help implement that culture of gratitude within their classroom and across the school.
That sounds fantastic, and all of these links to the website and the webinar and all ways of connecting will be on the show notes. So just go to educationonfire.com and all those links and all the details about the show will be on there, and we'll make sure you've got all the resources that you need. And just one sort of final point, which what I've decided to do in a coming season is we talk a lot about the education and what the teachers are doing and what the schools are doing, but very rarely do we actually talk to the children. And what I liked about what you just said was the whole thing about actually you listening to the children as well as the schools and the staff and that as well. And I want to spend one of the seasons actually talking to pupils and just sort of hearing, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, not just in terms of I like maths or I like science, but I don't like this and I do like that, but just kind of how they feel. What are the things that are in their school that make them feel good? What is it that makes them feel more themselves? And I'd really like if we can maybe get it working is to maybe have a chat with some of the people that within some of the schools that are already doing the program, and just sort of see if they've got a real sort of insight into what these changes have done for them and how it makes them feel.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. We can arrange that for sure. Actually, just on that, Mark, I'll share. This is a very short story, but it's one of the biggest moments we had in the program was through interviewing kids. And one of the things what happened was, this was going back probably a couple of years ago. I interviewed or verbally interviewed the kids, but also they had to fill out a bit of a survey as well, because what happened was before we did the major 600 children test, I just did a small sample test of 12 kids aged from about 6 to 11, boys and girls. And they had to do, for 6 weeks, they had to do these tasks. And one of them was writing 3 things they were grateful for every day, doing an act of kindness every day, didn't matter how big or small, but just an act of kindness. And they had to write the best part about their day at the end of the day. Then they had to, twice a week, they had to do something around the homes for their family. And every single child in that little 12 samples, and their parents as well, said that writing 3 things they were grateful for every day was boring, and they found it hard to think of things to be grateful for. And that's when I thought, well, hang on, that's a really good thing to know, because if that's the case, well, it's not going to stick for them, because they're not enjoying it. It's just going to go sort of like it's in one ear and out the other, and not really stick. So that's when we realised, well, hang on, that it's got to be more fun and interesting. So from that point, there's nothing wrong with writing 3 things you're grateful for, but it was just that everyday factor. That was the thing that they had. It was boring. So that's when we realised that we're going to have to make this a bit more interesting. And that's when we came up with the idea of, it's called the Habits of Happiness wheel. It's like a twister wheel, like the board game Twister, where you spin around and it says left hand on red, or on right leg on green, or whatever it is. But it's like that sort of thing, where you twist it around, you spin it around, and it's got 15 activities on it. 3 of the activities are based on gratitude, 3 on kindness, 3 on positive reflection, 3 on the wellbeing warrior, which is around meditation and exercise, and 3 on Operation Home Service. And so what happens is spin the wheel around, and whatever activity it lands on is the activity you do for that day. And that's the idea we got for that, because the kids found, I guess, just some of that activity boring, but we still wanted to cultivate gratitude, but we needed to do it in different ways. So we found different ways to cultivate it, and same with kindness and things like that. So it's just about keeping the variety, keeping it in fun for the kids, and using those different, I guess, strategies instead of the same one to cultivate it. And that's probably the biggest thing that we found, is getting those ideas of the kids, what works, what doesn't, and what they resonate with and what they don't. And that wheel was a printed material, but now we've made it into a web app, and that's part of the whole school approach, which is actually really cool. So it's great feedback from the kids.
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? You take on board what they're saying, and also I think probably the biggest takeaway from that particular thing is the fact that it then becomes relevant about today, because as the adults, and trying to help them in these things, you sort of the more traditional or adult ways of writing these things down, which you might understand as an adult, as a child it's slightly different. And just having something which is based on, right, today I'm going to do this because of this, they're very much living the now, which is a fantastic thing. And I think just encouraging that and supporting them and doing that, but at the same time really getting across the activities that you know are important through the Growing with Gratitude plan is it sounds like a really good way of doing it. So yeah, really, really fantastic. It's been so lovely to speak to you, and for me, this is just a really key thing for every school. Really, it just takes everything back to the heart of what it's about to be human, and especially as a child, and how we interact together. And I think from having some of these values in place and just really understanding them, I think it's a real bedrock really for all the other learning that you can have at school. But I think it's such a key thing, and I congratulate you on coming up with it and starting it and growing it, and anything we can do to support you, just let us know. And yeah, it's been a real privilege to chat.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I really appreciate your time and what you're doing, and giving teachers a good resource to use to discover different things that happen. So yeah, congratulations to you too.
Lovely, thanks very much. And and we'll hook up and try and speak to some of the children from your end again, and really get an insight into how they feel about what they're doing, and we'll try and link that in with our children and kids season.
Excellent. No worries, Mark. Thanks for your time.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Thank you for listening to the Education on Fire podcast. For more information, please go to educationonfire.com.